Well, welcome to our officially our second CQI Community of Learning webinar of the year. Typically at this point we would have had three, or this would be our third, but we skipped the middle one because we had our in-person grantee meeting, which we really feel is a great way for everybody to connect, and didn't feel the need to do a webinar also in April. So this is really our official second second webinar of the year. I'm sorry, I apparently cannot talk today, but welcome. We're so glad to have you all on the line. We're going to go ahead here in just a moment this morning and do some introductions, but I think that I just did hear a few more people join, so I will just repeat myself one more time. If you just recently joined and you haven't muted your line yet, if you could go ahead and use the mute button on your phone and or press *6 to mute, or if you're online, you'll want to go ahead and just manually mute your line online. Just to minimize the background noise that we have, we are recording this meeting today so that those who weren't able to attend can listen to it at a later date. We appreciate being able to minimize the background noise. So if you haven't muted your line yet, so that we can minimize the background noise because we are getting feedback right now. So before we dive into our content for the day, I want to go ahead and do a quick roll call to see who we have on the line. So what I'm going to do is just run through each of the LIA teams. If someone from your team can let us know who's on the line from your team today, that would be great. I'm going to go ahead and kick things off with Genesee Early Head Start. Okay, back to them in a minute. How about Ingham HFA?
This is Jody Spicer. Michelle Nicholson is also joining us. Unfortunately, both of my home visiting staff, one is on vacation and another is at another meeting, but Michelle and I are here.
Thanks. Welcome to both you and Michelle. Early Head Start.
Hi, Kelly. It's just me today.
Hi, thanks. Kalamazoo HFA.
Hey, here, and I think Deb will be joining us. Not online.
Awesome. Thanks, Denise. Well, Deb. Hey, Families America.
Hold on one second. Angela Stewart and Wadia Sanchez.
Good morning, Angela and Wadia. You're from Spalding, right?
Yes.
Welcome. Cindy from Kent.
Okay. She's here, and I believe Barb and Elise and Monica are on, and then my intern Paige.
Welcome, everyone. Hi, Muskegon Healthy Families.
You can hear us. We are here, most of the team, and I believe Marianne is on the phone too.
Marianne is right here.
Good morning.
Excuse me, Robin?
Yes?
Hi, can you hear me? This is Elaine Bradley from Wayne County Babies.
Elaine, yep, I can see you.
All of the staff is here as well. We've got Tilnisha, we've got Linda, and
Thanks for letting me know, Elaine. How about who do we have on the line from Oakland Early Head Start? Healthy Families Upper Peninsula.
This is Carrie.
Hi, Carrie. Healthy Families Northern Michigan.
This is Tricia. I believe at least Brittany's on the line, and I think we have a couple others calling in from various offices.
Yep, and you too, yeah.
Thanks, Tricia. Hey guys, this is Angela from MPHI. I just wanted to pop in for a quick second because I'm having trouble hearing everyone because there's still some noise from those of you who haven't been able to put yourselves on mute yet. So if you think they might be on mute and you're having side conversations, double check that you are on mute. We're still getting some noise from those of you who are figuring out and working through some something at your desk. So be sure that you put yourself on mute because it's really hard for us to be able to hear everyone when there are side conversations going on and phones are not muted. Thanks, guys. We have on the line from Saginaw EHS.
Trinkline's here. I believe Heidi's on at another location, and Kylie, are you on? Just Rita.
All righty. Thanks so much, Rita.
Yep, thanks.
Healthy Families?
It's Heather Toff and Julie Cotan's here with me as well.
Yes.
Morning.
Circle back and see if anybody's on from Genesee Early Head Start.
Hi, this is Pam, and I'm here from Saginaw County as well.
Oh, good, thank you.
Good morning, Robin. This is Lyons, and yes, we think we have all of our tech figured out. We've just switched over to Windows 10, and so things are a little different here. And so when we tried to log on, it was telling us we didn't have the right software. So now our wonderful tech guy came down and rectified everything, and we think we're good to go now. We're on audio now, right? Can you hear us?
You sure are. We can hear you great, and I'm so glad that you got your technical difficulties out, Kim. I know that can be really challenging when you're trying to hop onto a webinar sometimes. We have that on our end as well.
Oh, sorry, I just didn't even think about it this morning that we had installed that new software recently, and it may not.
No problem at all. Thanks so much for letting us know that you're here.
Okay, good morning, everyone.
Do we have anybody on from Oakland Early Head Start?
Claudia from Oakland Early Head Start. We are in Cero Multicultural Familia.
Thanks so much for letting us know that you're on, Claudia.
This is Holly DeBell from Tulsa with Early Head Start.
Holly, thanks for letting us know. Okay, moving on to the NFP LAs. Who do we have on the line from Hurley?
Hi, we have Trina, myself, we have Brandy, Annie, and we have Erica present.
Wonderful. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
Go back. You might be on mute. How about Ingham?
No, I have the entire team here, Kristen, Liz, Shawana, and Celeste, myself.
Awesome. Good morning, Ingham.
Good morning.
Like Kalamazoo, NFP is also on, and that Julie, Stacy, and Elaine were able to join us. Oh, and Nancy. So thank you so much for chatting that through the chat to us. Who do we have on from Kent?
Hello. I have here with me.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Good, Marcy. I have Katie, Angela, and Sue with me here today.
Good morning, Oakland team. Saginaw?
This is Leanne and Hillary. Deb and Beck will be in and out of the meeting.
All righty, not a problem. Thanks for letting us know. Detroit?
Good morning. It's Sharon Burnett and Mary Lopez.
Good morning. Calhoun? second team might have not been able to join us this morning. I'm going to circle back and see if we have anybody on from Berrien. I think we do because I see Berrien on the webinar.
Hey, it's Cheryl, and we have that's going. Never mind.
No problem, Cheryl. Thank you so much for letting us know that you're there, and I hope that your technical difficulties can be worked out. Let us know if there's any way we can be of assistance. I know that a couple of you this morning have chatted through the chat. If you have anything come up that you feel like you need to let us know, don't hesitate to send a message along through the chat, and we'll keep an eye on that and be attentive to that as we go through today's webinar. Before I move into webinar logistics, one quick question. I wanted to check and see if any of our MDHHS or other partners with the Michigan Home Visit Initiative are on the line today.
No, que tenían una junta ahí. Yo le acabo de decir que mañana voy a traer unas voluntarias.
Okay, I'm not hearing anybody at the moment, but I am getting a lot of background noise too, so just a couple more webinar logistic reminders. If you are on a phone, please be sure that you mute your line by using the mute button or pressing *6 to minimize background noise, since we are recording today's webinar. And if you are joining via phone online through the webinar technology, then please use the mute button on that to make sure that your line is muted when you aren't speaking, so that we don't have too much background noise, so that everybody can hear really clearly this morning. Also just mentioned this, but if you have something that you would like to share with others this morning and or share with us here at MPHI, feel free to use the chat to send us a message or send the whole group a message. All you need to do is actually enter in the response or the message that you'd like to send in the chat box. Select who you'd like to send it to. If you want to send it to us here at MPHI, you would want to send it to CHC admin. That's who's hosting this meeting. If you want to send it to everyone, you would just select everyone and or select the participant who you want to send it to. So we will be using the chat box some today when we get to a little bit more interactive part of our webinar. You know, please feel free to use that. And or if you have a question or something to say and let us know about, don't hesitate to unmute your line and ask it at any point in time. We really do want this to be interactive, but we do ask that you keep your line muted when you aren't speaking, so that our background noise is minimized, since we are recording today's webinar. I think that is all in terms of webinar logistics. Again, welcome everyone. We're so glad to have a really big group present on this morning's webinar. To go ahead and move into what we're going to talk about today. We're going to kick off the morning with LIA specific and home visiting coin PDSA cycle sharing, kind of checking in on that and see if anybody has anything in particular that they'd like to share with the entire group this morning. Then I'm going to move into addressing some questions. Some of you were able to send in questions to us when we reached out a couple weeks ago asking for questions. So we're going to run through some of those questions here this morning, and also have opportunity for those of you who maybe were not able to send in questions ahead of time to ask your questions and get those questions answered. And then we're going to move into some content for today. So we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about tasks versus tests. Some of you may have been able to listen to the home visiting coin presentation that was done around this. We kind of have some of our own slides and thoughts and tips to share with you all today, so we're going to do some of that. We're going to talk through a couple of new CQI resources that we have available that have been posted to the SharePoint site that you're all probably going to want to take a look at and check out. We'll talk next steps and reminders, and then of course we'll have time at the end for any questions, comments, or anything else you all like to talk about today. But again, don't hesitate to chime in and reach out if there's anything that you would like to share kind of as we go through this morning's webinar. So I think without further ado, I'm going to move us right into PDSA cycle sharing. And this is really our opportunity when we have these community of learning calls for you all to share with one another, share the quality improvement work that you're doing at the LIA level. So whether you are engaging in LIA-specific PDSA cycles or participating in the home visiting COIN Phase 2. If you have something that you feel like you could share with the group, either share a little bit about how your cycle is going and or share some tips, tricks that you have kind of come up with working through your CQI work. Ask questions of your peers if you think you're working on a cycle that's similar to what others may have encountered and you'd like some feedback on something. Really, this is just an opportunity to engage in some good, rich, peer-to-peer learning. And truly, you all are the ones that can do that with each other because you're all the ones that are working on your PDSA cycles and engaging in this work on a day-to-day basis. And I think that the more everybody can share with one another, the better, because we know that shared learning is just so rich. And I think that you all have done a fabulous job at the grant meetings. And the last grant team meeting, I know that we heard a lot about how really powerful the peer-to-peer sharing was that went on both in the morning and the afternoon. So we didn't get anybody who kind of let us know ahead of time that they had something that they'd like to share today. So I think I want to just pause and take a moment and see if there are any teams on the call this morning that had something about their QI work that they'd like to share with the group, and or something that you're kind of working through that maybe you're running into some challenges or barriers that you'd like some feedback on from your peers. So I'm going to take a moment and pause. If there is something that you'd like to share, remember you want to unmute your line to do so.
And, Angela or Robin, I forget. Cindy from had completed projects involving infant retention. Actually didn't go real well, and it involved standardizing our support materials and our visit cycle. I believe it did go very well because we did lose 2 nurses in late 2015 and 16. But we actually now are using the information from us and doing a transition plan with one of our nurses that will be leaving us in about 6 weeks. So although that wasn't things that we learned from our project are helping us to do a better job of transitioning clients with a nurse leaving.
It's really awesome to hear, Cindy, and I think that you really kind of get it. One of the neat things about doing quality improvement work is that, our cycles don't always result in the aims that we set, the goals that we're really trying to get toward. But a lot of times, even if they don't, there's so much rich learning that goes on that can be carried on in our work in other ways. And I think that your team really speaks to that rich learning from a cycle that you had that maybe wasn't as successful as you were anticipating, but you're really being able to apply those lessons learned as you're having some additional transitions with your program staff and thinking about what some of those lessons that you learned through that cycle, even though you may have not reached the goal that you set to do that work. So thank you so much for sharing that.
I'm into, this is Angela, guys, and I'm going to do sort of my own shameless plug for some of the things that we really encourage and kind of push on the side of the QI advisors, and I think Cindy's situation really speaks to this, and it really is about project documentation. So one of the things that I know you all hear from us time and time again is along the way, make sure that you're taking careful notes and you have a place that you're saving your project information. This is a really important step in making sure that everyone's on board for the current project at hand, but also creates a historical paper trail of things that have been done in the past, things that might want to be picked up in the future. Something that I think is really amazing about the PDSA cycle is that if there's a time and a place in some regards for certain cycles, and if you are finding that your PDSA cycle was not run in the right time or in the right place, you can always pick it up when things feel like it is the right time or right place. So I think Cindy's team has a really good example here of maybe when things settle down, when there's been a lot of staff turnover, if the environment didn't seem right for really being able to tease out if a particular change leads to an improvement, a rich source of documentation of previous projects might allow you all to kind of shortcut to another project in the future of, okay, things have settled, and let's revisit that issue of retention during the infancy period now that we feel a little bit more settled as a team. And comprehensive project documentation, whether that's in the form of handwritten notes or beautiful comprehensive storyboards or the whole universe in between. This is my plug for making sure that you are documenting along the way, because you might find yourself ready to revisit, as Cindy's team has, when the time is kind of right for that particular improvement opportunity. Questions about that, guys?
Or anyone else run into a similar situation that you might have something to share in that regard? And for sharing that, Cindy. I think that's a really, really great sharing for the good of the group. So appreciate you taking the time to share that with all of us. Other items that people have that they'd like to share with the group today, and either get some peer-to-peer feedback on, or just kind of share some really unique and exciting things going on with your CQI work. Alrighty, well, I'm not hearing anything, but I will encourage that if you have something to share, please do so today. These community of learning calls are really all about learning from one another and gaining knowledge from one another. So, if you have anything to share as we kind of go through the rest of our time together this morning, please feel free to do so. And I'll invite you all to think about this part of our community of learning calls, and to share any feedback that you might have with Angela and myself about what we might be able to do to better facilitate some of the peer-to-peer learning that we'd really like to have happen on these calls. If there's a format or a method that you've seen work really well on webinars that you've participated in that you think, oh wow, maybe Robin and Angela haven't thought about doing it this way, and this might work for our group, please feel free to share those things with us, because we really are looking for ways to make these calls as fruitful as possible for all of you, and we want to make sure that the rich peer-to-peer learning and sharing is happening. So if you have thoughts and ideas, don't hesitate to reach out to us and let us know. I think that the more you all understand and are aware of different PDSA cycles that each of your local implementing agencies is working on, the better, because on our end, as we look at all of your materials that come in, we see a lot of overlap. We see a lot of really awesome things going on, and we see teams that are facing some challenges and are looking for ways to overcome those challenges. But, I think that the sharing that is really much more powerful when it comes from the team, because you all can tell the story of your work so well, because you are engaged in it on a daily basis. So don't hesitate to share those things with your peers. The more learning we can do with one another, I think the stronger all of our CQI efforts will be. Thanks again this morning to Cindy for sharing one of your learnings. I think that was a really great learning for the whole group to hear, and I'm glad to hear that that work that, although it maybe wasn't successful back when you started it due to some fluctuation that you had internally with staffing and other things going on, you've been really able to take some of those fruitful lessons learned and pass them on to the future work and where you are right now in another period of transition. So thanks much. Go ahead and move us into some of the questions that you all sent in that you had either for Angela and I as CQI advisors and or for your peers. And this first question, I would say, is really truly for everybody on the line to kind of chime in and respond to, because Angela and I as QI advisors definitely are not experts in this area. So we're going to really look to you all to share some ideas with one another. But one of the questions that we had come in was, what procedures have other programs implemented in order to retain families on their waiting lists? So this question came from a program that has a waiting list, and they're trying to kind of figure out how do we retain these families on the waiting list until we have a spot that opens for them, and really wants to hear sort of, what kind of procedures, what kind of activities have you used to retain those people that you have on your waiting list, those families, so that when a spot does open, you can look to enrolling them in your program. So I'll invite you that if you have something to share, to please go forth and unmute your line and share some of your tips and tricks with the good of the group on the line today.
Actually, what we've done is, as the families complete the application process and everything, we mentioned to them that they would attend our play groups or socializations, get a feel for the program, and that kind of encourages them to get stuff done and meet some of our home visitors. And when we get an opening, then they start home visits.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that, Kim. Sure. I think someone else had something they wanted to jump in and share.
Trina from Hurley. I was just going to say we don't have a waiting list, but we do sometimes have, with our onboarding of new nurses, we have had lists where we haven't been able to see our referrals right away. So what we have been doing is sending out letters immediately upon getting the referrals, introducing program, and trying to also invite them to community activities that we are affiliated with or collaborate with, so that they can meet us, and we can also keep them engaged until we're able to assign them to a nurse.
Really awesome tip, Trina. I think that there's a lot of folks on the lines that have been in sort of that period of transition with their programs where, home visitors, nurse home visitors aren't quite on board yet, so you can't necessarily start filling their caseload, and those that are on board don't necessarily have space in their caseload, but you want to find something to help support those families in the interim as you wait to be able to actually enroll them into a home visitor's caseload. So thank you so much for sharing that. Father, mother? Anyone else have any unique thoughts or ideas or things that you've done within your own program when it comes to retaining families on waiting lists? All right, thanks to both programs that were able to kind of chime in and share some of their tips and tricks for addressing the waiting list issue and or incoming referrals that just can't quite be enrolled in services right away. Hopefully that helped answer the person who asked this question and gave you some ideas and some food for thought. And I would invite you that, if are, other things that you'd like to hear a little bit more about, to not hesitate to jump in and ask those things as we kind of move throughout today. So I'm going to move us into our next question. And our next question came from one of the LIAs, and it's kind of two questions in one. So I'm going to go ahead and read it, and then I will let you know from a QI advisor standpoint some of our recommendations on these particular questions. So the questions are, how closely should our Michigan Home Visiting Initiative and COIN CQI efforts be aligned? We suggest keeping them completely separate or have them correlate more closely. I think this is an excellent question, and a question that many of you have kind of tossed around and have asked on occasion, actually, of your QI advisors, just more on a one-to-one basis. And I think that this question is applicable for both those LIAs who are participating in the home visiting COIN, as well as those LIAs who are doing the LIA-specific work. Because this question really gets at more or less, how closely do our efforts with the initiatives, the Learning Collaborative, quality improvement projects, or ESA cycles that you're working through need to align with the cycles that we're doing on our own, either through your LIA-specific work or the home visiting COIN work. And I think that, response would be they can be closely aligned. Your program may find real benefit in closely aligning them, especially if you are struggling a lot with enrollment and getting your caseload filled, or struggling a lot with retention and keeping families enrolled in your program. If you're thinking to, the topic areas that we're working on for the Learning Collaborative this year, if you have a lot of work to do in those areas, then it could be really fruitful to align your honing COIN projects if you're participating in the family engagement collaborative within the COIN, or your LIA specific work with your Learning Collaborative work, and that really allowing you to do additional cycles focused within the same area. However, we also recognize that all of you may not have a need to do this, or it may not make sense for you to do that. So you don't necessarily have to have that close alignment or correlation between your projects. If you are, working within the Retention Collaborative for the Home Visiting Initiative, and you really notice as you are looking at your CQI data reports that we're sending you on a quarterly basis that there's something else that you need to work on as a program. You need to shift focus, and there's an area that's really kind of floated to the surface that's in need of some quality improvement work. Then we would definitely encourage you to tackle that area for your LIA-specific work. Or if you're participating in the Home Visiting COIN and you're in a collaborative that's not the Family Engagement Collaborative, that is in many ways well aligned with the collaboratives that we're running here in state this year, then yes, you should by all means continue to focus your work there and kind of keep those pieces separate. So it's sort of a both and answer. Yes, you can coordinate them really closely, and we would definitely recommend that if you feel like there's a lot of gain that you need to make in that particular area. Or you could choose to keep them separate if that's something that seems like it makes sense given what your data are showing you and where you really feel like you need to focus your improvement efforts. And I think I'll invite Angela to chime in and say anything else that she might have when it comes to this question.
Thanks. And this is a question that I oftentimes get sort of at the beginning of the fiscal year when we start to think about the Learning Collaborative work of the year, or when teams are really starting to formulate their ideas for their site-specific projects in their mind. And I think in a very explicit way, one of the things that I want to make sure that I say out loud here is that sometimes the questions I feel like are getting at, can we kill two birds with one stone here and use these two CQI opportunities to complete one project? And that's the piece that I want to make sure that we say out loud and explicitly. They really are meant to be set activities, really satisfying separate contractual requirements. So let's keep that in mind as we think about this. And also, keep in mind that there are ways, I think oftentimes this question comes from a place of trying to find efficiencies and trying to save very limited resources when it comes comes to the time, the staff, and the resources expended towards CQI efforts, we can think very strategically about ways to closely align projects in a strategic way that that doesn't convolute your end result. So you'll remember from our CQI trainings, when our projects are close line that is, we want to make sure that we very clearly know where improvements are coming from or where changes in our data are coming from. So if you would like some help in thinking that through, be sure to be in touch with your QI advisors. Robin and I think are pretty well practiced in finding those kinds of efficiencies in ways that still allow for two separate projects to be had in ways that are really productive for your team. So keep that in mind as you're thinking about this, especially as we move towards the new fiscal year, and we'll be thinking about new projects for everyone.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and move us into our next question, which was, what are some other tools we can use with root cause analysis and brainstorming potential solutions? I think this is an awesome question, and I'm so grateful that a team asked it, and really kind of gives us an opportunity to do connecting back to some of the resources that we provided you with when you came to your first comprehensive 2-day QI training with us, whether that be a training that we had several years ago or something more recently, like the one that we held last September. But at those trainings, we have equipped each of you with your training binder, of course, so you have that as a resource to go back to. But we've also equipped you with 2 books that are super helpful when it comes to doing some work with QI tools. I will point you to the guidebook, which is the larger spiral-bound book that we gave you. And if you look to page 71 in the guidebook, there is a QI tool selector chart. And this chart is really particularly useful when you're kind of trying to figure out what can I use, what can I work with, because the truth is a lot of our tools could be used at several different points in time during the PDSA cycle. So I would invite you to take a closer look at that. It's broken up into working with ideas and concepts, and working with numbers. And there you'll see PDSA steps where the tool is applicable. So if you're doing root cause analysis, you'll see that that happens in step 3, and there are several different tools that you could use for root cause analysis, being a fishbone diagram, force field analysis. A model could help you with root cause analysis. Another tool that could help you with root cause analysis, which I'm going to get into this piece here in just a minute, is a tool that's the interrelationship diagram. That's in your smaller pocket-sized spiral-bound tool or book that gave you, the Public Health Memory Jogger. So there are lots of different tools that you can use to do root cause analysis. You don't have to just do the fishbone. And so working with that tool selector chart could be particularly helpful. The other book that I think is really helpful is that little pocket-sized book that we gave you. And that book, fortunately, at the very beginning of the book has a very similar setup tool selector chart that you can use that will help you navigate through this pocket guide and find different tools that you can work through and use. And I think the really great thing about this Public Health Memory Jogger book is that it contains a wider variety of tools than we were able to provide through the guidebook. So the guidebook has a lot of the really standard go-to tools that teams tend to use when they're working through steps 3 and 4 of the PDSA cycle. The Public Health Memory Jogger has a lot of additional tools that you can use, and it's set up in a really user-friendly manner. You can literally open this up, go to a tool that you are wanting to use and try out, and really follow the steps. There's great examples in here. While the examples are not necessarily home visiting examples, they are real-world, relatable examples, and sometimes public health examples that I think a lot of you can relate to. But as I look at this smaller size book, there are several tools that I would recommend for root cause analysis, and then I will talk about the potential solutions piece next. But when you're thinking about root cause analysis, you can use the fishbone diagram or cause and effect diagram. It's sometimes called that. You might use a force field analysis. You might use an interrelationship diagram, which is actually noted as ID in this small group, small book. You might use a tree diagram, which the really cool thing about a tree diagram is it kind of does a trick for both of these things. The tree diagram has you really think about and explore the major root causes of the problem that you're experiencing, and then really leads you nicely into brainstorming potential solutions for each of those major root causes that you come up with. So that tool could really be used to accomplish both what you want to accomplish through root cause analysis and what you want to accomplish through brainstorming potential solutions. Of course, with brainstorming potential solutions, there's the affinity diagram, and I know that you all are familiar with that. That's a great tool because really it can end up looking and being whatever it needs to be based on the problem that you're looking to tackle or the root cause that you're looking to tackle through your quality improvement work. And, you know, I think that there are maybe possibly a few other tools that might interest you. I mean, at the heart of brainstorming potential solutions is brainstorming. I think we all know a lot of different ways to go about doing brainstorming. There are structured processes out there and there are less structured processes. So I would encourage your team to think about too, you know, in terms of brainstorming, if there are ways that you find work really well for your team as you're getting to brainstorming potential solutions and your end product may not end up looking exactly like an affinity diagram, but uses some other brainstorming techniques to get the ideas out on the table and then organizing them in a way that's usable for you all as you work through your PDSA cycle, then I would encourage you all to kind of go in that direction. I hope that that was helpful in answering this question, and I think I'll just check in with Angela and see if she has anything additional she might like to add.
No, I think Robin's been a really good pointer towards more tools and resources that are available to you all, and throw some of those names of particular tools that are really helpful here. I think if I had to plug something that I would certainly recommend teams to look at, my tool of the day that I'm really focusing on lately that I have found so much utility in is field analysis. So if you're looking to move beyond fishbone diagrams and you want to think a little bit differently about the things that are working for you and working against you when you're thinking about your where you want to go with your area for improvement and maybe what's contributing to it, I really recommend reading up, just even taking a few minutes to look in your guidebook and look in your memory jogger of how to conduct a force field analysis. Or I will plug Robin and I here. You could always give us a call and call us into one of your meetings, and we would love to walk your team through the creation of something like a force field analysis or testing out a new tool. So my little plug for the day that that if we could help walk you through a tool and practice something new, feel free to give us a call or shoot us an email of when we might be able to do that.
Angela? Our written question that came in was, for LIA-specific CQI projects, do we have to complete a formal storyboard? And this is a great question, and I think it made us realize that perhaps maybe we need to clarify this a little bit more. The answer is yes. If you want the short, quick, and sweet answer, we do ask that for each of your projects, at a minimum, the documentation that you have in place that you share with us, that we will provide one comprehensive review of for you, and then additional reviews upon request, would be the team charter, which is really your roadmap for doing your quality improvement work, and the storyboard, which allows you to really comprehensively document the story of your PDSA cycle so that you can share that story with others internally and externally, and think about sharing it with the group. We do have a number of storyboards that are posted to the SharePoint site, and that's a great place to go and look and see what some other teams have done. I will kind of put the caveat out there that we don't post those storyboards until we know that they are final and the teams give us the okay. So you may pop on there and see that, oh, I think completed a project, but I don't see our storyboard up here. If that's the case, feel free to send Angela and I an email, because perhaps maybe we never closed the loop on knowing whether or not that was final and A-okay and ready to share with others, so that we can learn from each other. So please do feel free to let us know. I'm not going to get into this too much because we're going to talk about it here in just a little while, but we have gotten some requests for a storyboard template that's formatted more in PowerPoint versus the poster that we've been using for the last couple of years. So here at MPHI, we have been really working toward addressing that request, and we're excited to announce today, and Angela will share a little bit more about this in a little bit, that we have a storyboard template that's now available in Microsoft PowerPoint. So you can choose to use the poster template or the PowerPoint template for documenting your LIA-specific work, but you do need to have a storyboard for each PDSA cycle that you complete for your LIA-specific projects. Angela?
I'll show you all the PowerPoint later in today's presentation, but that was pretty thorough. Thanks, Robin.
Right. And I think right now I'm just going to take a moment and kind of open things up and see if there are other CQI-related questions that you have for each other and or for Angela and myself.
Robin, this is Kim Lyons. For the storyboard, then, when is that due?
Kim, an excellent question. The storyboard would be due upon completion of that PDSA cycle. So the expectation would be that when you all wrap up an LIA-specific PDSA cycle, you submit your storyboard to us. We do have the quarterly deadlines for LIA-specific materials, which stay the same every fiscal year. Those deadlines are January 15th, April 15th, July 15th, and October 15th. And, you know, at that time, we would ask that you submit anything that you have that you need feedback on and or has been finalized and you're ready to share. However, we are really encouraging teams to stay in conversation with us about your quality improvement work on an ongoing basis. Although we have those quarterly deadlines, we recognize that that's not very just in time when you're working through a project and you may need feedback sooner. And I will say that most of you and your teams have done that, and we hear from you regularly. Some of you we hear from monthly, which is really, really awesome because it helps us stay well connected to your work and provide the best coaching and support possible that we can. But I mean, formally, you would need to submit the storyboard upon conclusion of that PDSA cycle to us.
Thanks for reminding me.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking that question because I'm sure others had that wondering as well. Well, not hearing any other questions, I think we'll kind of go ahead and move forward to the task versus test content that we're planning to cover on today's webinar. But I will just put the plug in that every time we have one of these community of learning calls, we are going to ask for your questions. I think that this also provides another opportunity for really, really in-depth learning from each of your teams, and I think gets answered some questions that a number of you have floating around that maybe you've asked on occasion or have thought about but maybe not remembered to ask us. So hopefully answering these questions and talking through these pieces today was helpful and that you all were able to take something new away that you can apply to your work as you continue to move forward with your CQI work. At this point in time, I'm going to turn things over to Angela, who's going to take us through the next part of our morning together.
And thanks everyone who's still on the call. Just to kind of start out with where Robin was ending her section of our community of learning today, I really want to put the plug in there that we see so much value in our communities of learning, and the way that we structured our agendas might sort of speak to this, but in a community of learning, I think what I like most is there's value in everyone's experiences and everyone's knowledge. So we really do see this as a chance for you all to talk about common problems, unique solutions, to connect with each other about ways that you are addressing some of the opportunities for improvement that are really common across home visiting programs. And we really do see you all as the experts in the room when it comes down to what you know, having your boots on the ground is problematic, solutions that you know are helpful. And so we really, really encourage you to come to what you saw at the front end of our agenda of connecting with each other with questions, asking each other for tips and tricks. You are all the experts in the implementation of home visiting programs and what you do on a day-to-day basis. So thanks for bringing your expertise to the table. As we've done in a lot of our quarterly calls, we also we like to bring our expertise to the table when possible. And oftentimes in the past, we've brought to you in-depth conversations about CQI requirements, about new tools that we think are helpful, or content information that we think is really sort of timely to what we're seeing within the projects that are ongoing. So that's what we're going to do next, is to focus in on something that Robin and I have really been thinking more and more about in the past year or so, and something that we think is a really timely topic to talk about. And that's really thinking about this concept of task versus test. So as we're diving a little bit deeper into CQI methodology, I'll plant that seed in your head of thinking about what is a task, what is a test, how are they different, and how are they related to CQI. So we talk about this, to be perfectly honest, I think part of it comes from, in my experience, seeing projects that are really very task heavy, that are focusing a little bit more on the task of a program or the task of a larger test as opposed to a smaller scale test. We want to take some time to think a little bit more in depth about that and give you some common understanding, common language, and also some examples that I think will paint a picture of what we're talking about, of what is a task, what is a test, and how are they both important but different when it comes to quality improvement. It goes without saying that you will need to complete tasks in order to fully complete a PDSA cycle. That is probably obvious to all of us. But what might not be is that differentiation, that a task is necessarily a test in itself. So let's talk a little bit more in depth about what those definitions are. So when I say task, something might come to your mind, and this is what I'm actually talking about. A task is an activity that has to be completed or something that needs to be done. This can be logistics of implementing your model. This can be following a protocol to do your home visiting task. Or this might be something that you're doing in order to get to your QI goals. So common tasks that we oftentimes see related to CQI and in the work that you do are brainstorming, gathering information about your opportunity for improvement or about potential solutions, training your stakeholders or training your staff, collecting data, or maybe even creating a data collection instrument, and deciding when the test will be done or who will run it. These are tasks related to a larger PDSA cycle, a larger PDSA project. Whereas a test, when I'm using that word, I'm talking about trying a change on a small scale. So within a PDSA cycle, testing something out, trying something, a tweak in a current and existing process to see if that change actually results in improvement. So I think this is sort of helpful to see the contrast between those common tasks and what are actually examples of tests of change and what tests of change actually do. So when I talk about a test is answering a specific question that you think something might happen, that you have a hint that thing might create consequence in your overall outcome. A test of change requires a theory and a prediction. You've heard Robin and I talk about if-then statements and improvement theories, and that is a really important component of creating a test for improvement. Also done on a small scale. They collect data over time. They are something that are tried out whether it's over a short period of time, whether it's only with a small group of clients or families, or maybe if it's something, it might be something that's being tested out only over a couple of your staff members. It's not necessarily something that is standardized already or has plans for standardization. This is trying something out to see if it works without a commitment of whether or not it's going to be the standard protocol in the end. And test changes are completed in a wide range of conditions. As you know, part of moving from study to act is thinking about, okay, we learned something about this particular test. What do we need to learn more about? Does this need to be expanded to more home visitors, or should we try this out across more families? Or do we need to test this out in the winter as well as in the summer to see if our outcomes hold true to what we experienced during our testing phase? And hopefully this helps gain a little bit of clarity between what is a task and what is a test. I should give a plug here that our partners over at the Home Visiting Coin encourage us to borrow from each other, to share information that is helpful within new audiences and new ways. So our friends over at Coin say we have shamelessly stolen some of these topics. So those of you who are in the Coin, this is probably something that you've heard before, something that you've gotten feedback on. And for most of our the teams that we're working with, you might have actually heard us talk a little bit more from the QI advising standpoint about, this sounds a little bit more like a task as opposed to a test. Let's get a little bit deeper into what it is that you are trying to change and what specific question you're trying to answer through your PDSA cycle. And anything that you'd like to add when we're just kind of opening up the lines to task versus test?
I don't think so at this point, Angela, but thank you so much.
Sure. Hey guys, so reminding us all that tasks do have an important place in the PDSA cycle, but they shouldn't be confused with a test for improvement. And what you see here on this slide is, I think, a pretty clear example of that. So the cell, that box that you see that says tasks and tools needed to complete the PDSA cycle, this is listed completely from your team charter template. So you can see here that thinking through your tasks and the tools needed to complete your PDSA cycle is a really critical part of planning out and actually doing the test for improvement that you've planned out. But a task itself is not necessarily the test. So I'll remind you all that the day-to-day operations of conducting home visiting, that's not the same thing as a test, nor are the individual tasks needed to complete the actual PDSA cycle. So you'll hear me say this several times. Make sure that you're asking yourself, if we do something specific, if we do this one very specific thing, do we think it will result in a change? And this might help your team, and as you're planning out your tests for improvement, it really might help you differentiate, this is a task or this is a test. It's helpful to see this in concrete examples, and I'm going to start with something that is really, really generic. We'll talk more about home visiting examples in just a couple of minutes, but this example, I think, kind of drives home something that we can all relate to. So let's take a non-visiting, but certainly public health-related PDSA cycle of someone who's looking to increase their daily intake of water. So let's say the example that I'm aiming to increase my daily intake of water to at least 64 ounces by August 31st of this year. So here, let's talk about what is a task related to this change that I'm working towards, and what are actual changes that I'm testing out that are appropriate to be called a test. So tasks that I'm going to need to complete in order to work towards my goal. I need to buy a water bottle. I have to have something to actually put the water in so that I can increase my daily intake of water. That's a critical task for me to be able to work towards my goal. I need to set up a way to track my water consumption. PDSA requires a measured strategy, something that actually has some concrete indicators of whether or not a change led to an improvement. So I want to make sure that I have that in place so that when I get to my study stage and I look backwards of, okay, did I get there? I need to have a way to count whether or not I've met my 64-ounce goal. I want to track how much water I currently drink. So that's a way that I'm setting my baseline. I need to be able to compare how far do I need to go to get to that 64 ounces. That's something that might help me plan out my test for improvement, but also something that when I'm ready to study is going to tell me, did I make it to my goal or not? Where did I start out and where did I end within this PDSA project? And I'd also, I might look at good ideas from others online of what do other people do to, in this example, increase daily intake of water. So think about those as tasks that are related to this action, to the process change of getting me closer to my goal of 64 ounces of water by August 31st. But there are more specific changes that I could think about testing to make it to my goal or to see if a tweak in my current process leads to improvement. So as opposed to those concrete tasks like buying a water bottle, think of these changes that I could possibly test in getting myself to that goal. I could think about scheduling an hourly alarm. And my more scientific question here is, will scheduling an hourly alarm help me remember to drink water? I could add cucumber or lemon. Maybe I'd test that out for a period of time. And my scientific question is, will their flavor make me want to drink more? I think this might bring a little bit more of a concrete example to you to think about task versus test. Make sure that you're asking yourself that question. If I do this specific thing, do I anticipate seeing a change because of that simple thing? I would point your attention to that first task, buying a water bottle. It is inherent that you have to have some sort of a vessel in which to put your water to be able to even be drinking water. So this is a very clear task as opposed to a test that you want to try out to see if it leads to improvement. That isn't necessarily home living related. So with that, let's think about it to another level of more specific to home visiting. So let's take the same format and think about the tasks related to a particular area for improvement and actual changes to test to see that contrast between what is a task and what is a test. So let's take a QI team that's working within the realm of home visiting who wants to increase the number of completed home visits, say 15% by the end of this year, by 12/31 of 16. There's some tasks that are related to getting this work underway or getting this PDSA cycle completed. The task could be to survey clients to learn what contributes to the completion, or surveying clients to find out why they're missing visits, to learn a little bit more. This might sort of set off your root cause analysis radar. This is looking deeper at the problem, and possibly when looking at the contributions to visit completion, maybe might start dabbling into potential solutions that your team might want to do. This is an important aspect of gathering information, but this is really a task of your planning stage when you're looking at root cause analysis and thinking about potential solutions. You might think about reminding home visitors of model-supported engagement strategies. This is likely not already existing thing that is new to test. So it's business as usual and something that you are expected to do as a part of completing your model requirements. That's not the same thing as a test for improvement. So this is a task. Creating a tracking document to track expected and completed visits. This is really critical when you're thinking about that word measurable. That is really, really important in quality improvement, especially when you're doing a PDSA cycle. It needs to be something that's measurable, but creating a tracking document itself or completing the tracking document isn't actually the test. This is a task related to making your PDSA cycle measurable and being able to look back in the study stage and say, what did we learn? What did our data look like at the beginning? What did it look like at the end? And let's compare. A list of methods that other agencies use to increase completion. This is something that is really important that we see a lot of teams do. This is really in some ways looking to the literature and looking to expertise of other things that people are doing, but in itself isn't necessarily a change. This is a part of looking at potential solutions that your team might want to think about when it comes to picking a particular method and applying it as a small-scale change to test out. In contrast, let's think about changes that can be tested, that a QI team looking at increasing complete home visits might engage in within a PDSA cycle. So just that could be tested. And these are actual examples that have come from all of your work in your PDSA cycles. A change that could be tested here could be reminding clients to text the day before a visit. Here, more scientific question. Will this make clients remember to attend visits? Revisiting client goals at the beginning of every visit, asking yourself, that checking in about goals, will that make clients feel more engaged in programming, thus leading them to be more engaged and possibly more likely to complete their home visits? So you can hopefully see a little bit of that difference, that those changes that are being tested are asking and answering very specific questions and very specific predictions of what's happening in the process.
Sorry, well, I'm going to jump in here really quick, and we have at least one phone that's not muted. If you are on your phone and you have not muted your line, if you could do so, that would be great. We're getting a lot of feedback, and I'm imagining that it is very challenging for people to hear what Angela is telling you.
Guys, so we're going to move forward actually with a few more examples and something that's a little bit more interactive. So what I'm going to actually do is I want to point you in the direction of your chat box. This is a great chance for us to not only get a little bit of feedback from you and kind of play a little pop quiz game of is something a task versus a test, but it's also my way as a facilitator to point you in the direction of a resource that's important for you all, technology-wise, when we do these community of learning calls. Your chat box is a great place to either direct a question just to Robin or myself, which you can do by simply selecting from the drop-down box that you want to send us a private message. Or it could be a good place for you to ask a question to the group, share an experience. For those of you who either might not have a mic available, or it might not be the way that you like to share information. So your chat box is a great place to go to when you want to interact in kind of a different way, or if there's something that you want to nudge Robin and I at, go to your chat box. So what I'll invite you all to do, if you can't see your chat box right now, click on that blue chat bubble at the top of your toolbox ribbon. You should see a chat box pop up. So what I'm going to ask you to do is, after I give you these particular scenarios, take just a minute as a team to think about, is this a task or is this a test, and set it into your chat box. And we're going to do sort of an informal poll and hear from you all of whether you think this is a task or a test. So here's a situation to consider. A team is thinking about surveying home visiting families to find out when they would be available for a recognition event. Intention here is to pick a date for a recognition event that works for most clients. The QI team has developed an aim statement related to what they're trying to test out here, and that is that by July 20th, 2016, 50% of clients who complete a home visit will fill out a recognition event interest survey. Their improvement theory is that if we survey families to determine best dates for an event, then more families will attend the event. Think of it as a team for a minute. My question to you all, is this a task or is this a true test? Take a minute to think about it and type in your chat box, test or task. Exciting to see from our facilitator end. I'm seeing a lot of tasks pop up that I haven't yet, other just one, seen anything other than tasks. So The answer to this question is that this is a task. This is not something that's being tested out on just a small scale to see if it results in an improvement, and surveying itself won't necessarily result in the larger change that this QI team is really going towards. There are ways that a lot of these more task-related situations can be tweaked in order to be made into a test. For instance, in this case, I would say the survey itself isn't going to contribute to the larger scale outcome that this team is looking for, unless for some strange reason this team was really focusing on only having high numbers at a recognition event. But I'll say for all of you, whether you're talking about your COIN work, or collaborative work, or your site-specific QI work, we are focusing on these big picture, more benchmark-related outcomes like retention and enrollment and outreach, engagement, things like that. So this is an example of a task that might be a part of a larger test. Try out, guys. About this one, a team is thinking about hosting a recognition event with overall intention of decreasing attrition in their home visiting program. The aim of this team's project is that by December 31st of 2016, 30% of families will participate in a recognition event. The theory on the table within this scenario is that if more families are recognized amongst their peers for home visiting related successes, then less families will drop out of the program prior to graduation. Take a minute, meet with the minds of your team and type in your chat box if this is a task or this is a test. This is guys. Thank you so much for your responses. I totally threw you a curveball here because this is a really funny gray space. I call this a test-ish. In this case, we're not talking about a small-scale change, and we're talking about something that is related to a process change, looking for the improvement within a larger outcome. However, I would question whether or not this is an existing process, and remember, QI really depends on that we are tweaking existing processes. If this is something that's brand new, this might not be an appropriate test, and it might actually be a task that is more related to the implementation of your model or the implementation of a plan for a high-quality process. So another question would be, does holding one recognition event tell you much about attrition? So that might be something that this team might think about are there things that are a bit more proximal to the implementation of the day-to-day activities that might do more to address attrition on a smaller scale? So things like looking to make sure that home visitor and clients are matched up in a way that really helps people connect and establishes good rapport? Are there things that can be done on a smaller scale within smaller groups of families that really help them feel recognized or really get to the root of why families might need to feel better connected or how families could possibly feel more engaged to not be dropping out early within the program? To that, Robin.
I think that actually provides some really good food for thought behind this particular one, and in some cases it may be a good test for your program if this is a PDSA cycle that you're working on. But I would encourage you to think about some of those pieces that Angela just shared and whether or not this is proximal enough to tell you something about what's going on, or whether or not is this something new that you've never done before. Have you never brought families together in this way, and maybe this is something more from a quality planning perspective that you need to think about and work on and consider whether it actually is something that's successful, and then maybe take it more into a improvement cycle where you do something more around this. So just some good things to think about as you're kind of teasing out testing these different ways of doing things, and in this case trying to see if you can retain families for a longer amount of time.
Thanks, Rob. I'm going to give one last pop quiz example before we move on a little bit, but here's another idea. This particular team in question is asking event participants to fill out a questionnaire about their experience at the recognition event, and their intention here is to get feedback to consider future events. The statement of this particular PDSA cycle, hypothetical PDSA cycle, is that by January 31st of 2015, 75% of recognition event participants will complete and submit an event evaluation form. The theory behind this project is that if a majority of participants provide feedback about the event, then future events can be tailored to the needs of participants. Take a think as a group. Is this a task or is this a test for improvement? And write in the chat box. Great, guys. I'm seeing some really good responses here. At the end of the day, this is a task, but as several of you have noted in the chat box, this is a task that is related probably to a larger test. So asking event participants to fill out a questionnaire to get that feedback about future events, this is important. This is really important information gathering. It could be for a current test of making sure that your statement is really well tailored to something that your stakeholders are responsive to. But in itself, it's not necessarily a test. So great job on that, everyone. I have one more slide of examples that I'm just going to actually run through quickly to make sure that we make it through all of our content today. So also think of an example of reviewing engagement data over the next 6 months with the intention of seeing if participants in the recognition event are more likely to stay engaged in the program. This should sound very familiar with making sure that your QI project is measurable, making sure that you know how your numbers continue on after your do, study, and act stage, and how you're going to sustain gains that you accomplish through PDSA cycle. This in itself, gathering the data, is not a test. Another one that we see pretty commonly, kind of fits along this similar vein of our last bullet, sending 3 home visitors to a training on planning and hosting recognition events, with the intention of being able to provide high-quality recognition events. This itself is not something that's being tested on a smaller scale. This is something that is not tweaking of an existing process, and this is a task related to possibly a larger test of being responsive to your staff needs or your client needs recognition. So think a little bit more deeply about these with your teams, and always come to us if you have any questions. So I think what really helps kind of drive this home is to think a little bit more deeply about why we test when we're talking about quality improvement and using the PDSA cycle. So when we're thinking about testing, we're increasing the belief that the change will result in improvement. We have a hint that change is going to result in improvement, and we want to make sure that we can think a little bit more deep about increasing that belief. We want to document how much improvement can be expected from the change. PDSA and structured quality improvement is different from just testing something out on a very informal way, partially because it's metered, it's measured, and it's really strategic. So we want to make sure that testing tells us what we might expect if we do something in a similar or possibly a tweaked environment. We want to learn how to adapt the change to conditions in the local environment. We encourage you all to start small, to then think about scaling up after you've learned something by rolling out a test with 1 home visitor, or over the course of 1 or 2 weeks, or maybe with only a couple of families. That test will tell us if it's worth rolling it out on a larger scale or testing it out in sort of a bigger, wider environment. And that test is really what leads us in that direction. This part appeals oftentimes to people saying, what's really in it for us? Tests really helps you evaluate the costs and side effects of the change. What is it that needs to go into creating this change, and what are either expected or unintended side effects of doing this? It's a really great way to try something out to see how it dominoes into the environment and what kind of effects come from it. So we want to make sure that we're testing things out on a small scale and a non-permanent scale until we've learned a little bit more about what to expect. I really like testing for this last bullet, that oftentimes when they call it science of change, but really it's thinking a little bit more deeply about resistance to change. That testing something out is a way to really help introduce a tweak to a current process that staff or stakeholders might be attached to. So testing something out, oftentimes I found teams have really a benefit of saying, you know what, we're just going to try something for a short period of time. This is not the end-all, be-all. We're not putting a stick of dynamite in how we've always done something. Let's just try something out and be open and flexible to this one little change and talk a little bit about what it does and what it felt like, and then we can decide if we're going to make it a permanent solution to this particular opportunity for improvement. So testing something out can really help warm groups up to changes in processes and changes in protocols. I'm going to kind of open the floor to you all. What questions do you have when we're talking about task versus test? In the interest of time, guys, and since I'm not hearing anything, I will invite you all to continue thinking about this and certainly reach out to Robin or myself if you're really starting to think a little bit more about a new project, if you want to run by us. Is this a task? Is this a test? How can we make this task more test-like? We would be really happy to talk with you about that. I want to run through a couple of things and point out some new resources on our SharePoint site. Robin hinted to this, but one thing that you're going to be able to find on our SharePoint site now is our PowerPoint storyboard template. We heard from a lot of our teams that participated in our learning collaboratives this year that they really liked the opportunity to summarize their PDSA cycle with a PowerPoint template. So we've tweaked that and changed it so it's something that you can all use for your site-specific storyboarding now, and you will find that template on our SharePoint site. So I'll invite you to take a look at that and maybe test run that with your next storyboard that's coming up. Of course, that's to say, as Robin mentioned, if you feel that the publisher or the Microsoft Word one-pager that can be printed as a poster is the right way to go for your team. What we're really happy about is that this affords us a little bit more flexibility. So at the end of the day, yes, we want to hear your story of what your PDSA cycle looked like, what you did and what you learned through a storyboard, but we're being a bit more flexible than we had in the past of thinking through what that looks like. So if PowerPoint works better for you, go ahead and try that out. But if you're feeling attached or more that the poster size storyboard is more appropriate, go ahead and use that as long as we're getting some kind of summary at the end of your project. Another resource that you'll find on SharePoint is our PDSA in a nutshell resource. This is something that was created for a team that has experienced a lot of turnover, and we realized, oh, this could be universally helpful to other teams. So our PDSA in a nutshell resource is really, it's a 3-page document, maybe 4 pages, that really walks through what is quality improvement, what is PDSA, and is a good way for you to either refresh your team's knowledge about what PDSA is. It might be a way to introduce new staff to the concepts that you've all had the opportunities to be trained on. And it might also just be a way to polish up some of your skills when it comes to CQI. So take a look at that when you have a chance. You'll find that on our SharePoint site. I'm going to go through just a couple of next steps and reminders, some of which are a little bit of a moot point for our teams. This first one is that our CQI document review is underway. Our July quarterly document deadline was on July 15th. If you haven't submitted new team charters that you'd like to have reviewed or storyboards, please feel free to send them our way. Learning Collaborative data and project updates are being reviewed and compiled this week. We've received a lot of your updates and your data. If you haven't sent them in, please send them our way. Next, we want to make sure that between now and September, our teams that are in the Learning Collaborative, they are working towards completing at least one more PDSA cycle. So as we've talked about, I know I've talked about this with my team, you're going to be creating a project summary that just adds to what you've already created and shared at the April grantee meeting. Once you've completed this next PDSA cycle for your Learning Collaborative work, so your retention or enrollment work, we'll ask you to just keep going with your PowerPoint storyboard that you shared in April and add more slides that summarize your next PDSA cycle. So that is something that you'll share at our grantee meeting in September. Our meeting is actually on Thursday, September 22nd. It will be here in the Lansing area at the Henry Center where we've met before. But we also have a chance to talk in October when we'll have our next Community of Learning webinar. So on Wednesday, October 19th, we'll be meeting in the same fashion as we did today from 9:30 to 10. It's likely that we will also see you all before any of these dates at the Home Visiting Conference, August 3rd through 5th. That will be at the Renaissance Center in downtown Detroit. I'm going to put a quick plug in for our Learning Collaborative summary session where Lynn, myself, and 3 of our participating teams in our Learning Collaborative will be talking about what we did and what we learned. And we'll also be having a session on QI methodology and tools. So if you're looking at polishing your skills and kind of taking your CQI knowledge to the next level, think a little bit about meeting up with Robin and I in our CQI sort of Beyond the Basics session. I know that I've run us out of time, but are there any important burning questions or comments that you all have before we sign off for the day? Okay, we are actually going to thank you all for your time. I will extend this open mic to all of you to give Robin or I a call if you have any questions or concerns that you want to talk about, or shoot us an email. I know a lot of you have our information nearby, but here it is on your screen if you want to give us a call or send us an email. We always encourage that open communication for you all to be in touch with us. So with that, guys, I really want to say thank you for your time and attention today. We always value our chance to get together as a team and talk about our learnings of all of us being sort of scholars and practitioners in quality improvement. So thank you for your time and attention today. Thank you for all of your work and your quality improvement efforts. And we certainly have a few opportunities to see each other talk in the coming weeks, and we'll look forward to seeing your faces and hearing your voices then. So be in touch if you have any questions, and otherwise, have a great day, everyone.